Hello YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Tomorrow's Talk Today. I'm your host, Madison Evans, and today I am joined by panelists Alasia Toney and Caleb Cottrell. On today's episode, we'll be discussing the issue of censorship and the role that the government plays in deciding what to censor. We will also discuss censorship in social media and how cancel culture plays a role in silencing dissenting ideals. Censorship plays a huge role in our lives, even if we don't know it. But can it do more harm than good? Today, we can find censorship in the news, entertainment, and even on social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. We will discuss just how phenomenons like cancel culture play a role in today's media and how it ties into censorship. But first, let's take a look at a clip that defines censorship in the United States.
In broad terms, censorship occurs when individuals, groups, or government officials decide that certain images, information, or ideas are so objectionable that no one should have access to them. This so-called offensive content can be found in books, magazines, films, videos, or works of art. Censorers succeed when the materials are edited, restricted to particular audiences, or removed from public access.
Well, as you can see from that clip, the government has a significant role in the censorship of the media that we consume. But can censorship be harmful to the general public, even if it was meant to protect us? Alasia, what are your thoughts?
So when it comes to censorship being harmful to the general public and due to the media we consume today, I do believe that, especially when looking into reporting, reporters often have to shaking.
Well, I feel like, to add on to what you said, I feel like censorship is put into place when someone decides that something is more morally corrupting than it is morally uplifting. And although I feel like the general public has a right to speak their mind and access to a lot of information, like including what she was saying about reporters reporting out information, the First Amendment doesn't protect that right of free speech if that speech is inciting violence. And I feel like that creates a loophole where the government can censor a lot of the information that people are putting out. And I feel like sometimes that can go too far.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that censorship is a big issue in the United States?
Yes, I do believe that it's an issue, but I feel like in more countries it's more so there than in the U.S. because in the U.S. we have a democracy, so as being the people, we have the right to have freedom of speech. So I think that when we do have the freedom of speech, it can sometimes be interpreted into hate speech. So I do think that it just all depends on the way that the content is described on the social media platform.
Mm-hmm. How would you guys personally define hate speech? Just, your personal opinions.
I think it's like when a content creator is conveying information that they personally feel is hatred and isn't good to the public. That's my definition.
I feel about the same as her. I mean, most people see it as when one individual is like putting hate towards a certain organization or another group of people, I feel like. And that does need to be regulated because it creates a lot of negatives.
It does. That line is it's so hard to find. It can be blurred in so many ways. I was listening to this discussion last night that I was not a part of, I was just listening, and they were talking about Dave Chappelle jokes and comedian jokes and how it's it's comedy, it's supposed to be funny, it's just a joke, but then it's some people actually believe those jokes, and I feel like that's where stereotypes come into play and where hate speech is kind of really cataclysmic.
But I also think that censorship can also be helpful to the general public because when it comes to hate speech, for an example, what we post on social media, I think that, how do I put this? I lost my train of thought. So I think it can be helpful because when it comes to hate speech, the government is able to disclose on threats and the incitement to violence. So I think it could be helpful in those certain aspects.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think that all forms of hate speech should be censored, even in the case of education purposes?
For the case of education purposes, I say no in some cases. I feel like people need to learn about what is going on around the world, even if it is some negatives. And with too much regulations, I feel like even from the younger generation, you can create a narrow-minded society and not knowing the full picture of what's going on around the world.
Yeah.
I think at a young age, I think children should learn more about censorship so they can kind of have like an idea at a young age of like what it can do to a person. And then as you get older, I feel like they'll have more knowledge on what hate speech can do and how censorship plays a huge part of that.
Right. I think it's really important to, more information, the better. But then, and that leads into our next topic. So thank you all for bringing up some very good points about the government's role in censorship. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back, so stay tuned.
You're listening to WMLU 91.3 FM, the music of Longwood University, and Farmville Virginia. Rebound to Phillips. Great, strong rebound by Cody Phillips. Then Jordan Centron with the mid-range jumper goes down off the backboard.
So the sports committee within WMLU is an award-winning committee in itself, and it's an opportunity for people to be able to call Division I athletic events. Basketball, we've done soccer, we've done softball for the first time last year. This year we're doing tennis for the first time, which I'm excited about, as well as baseball in the mix as well. So it's an opportunity for people to get on-air experience, learn who they are as a play-by-play, on-air talent. And there's a lot of different things that kind of come with that.
All right, so with WMLU Sports, there's always 3 people working a game. So usually there'll either be 2 people calling the game, color and play-by-play, and then there'll be 1 person in the studio working the soundboard right here. The soundboard is to make sure that the guys or girls at that game are sounding good. They can hear them over the air or the web stream. If there's any problems, the person in the studio is able to adapt and adjust and make sure that everything here is working well.
I'm a proud Longwood graduate, class of 2011, and there is no way I would be here if it weren't for my time behind the mic at WMLU, the music of Longwood University and the award-winning home of your Longwood Lancers.
So this is an opportunity to grow, learn, figure out what works best for you, what skills you have, what makes you a good on-air talent, good play-by-play person. But it's also, of course, an opportunity to just meet new people with similar interests. Inherently, if you're joining the sports committee, you probably like sports, and then everybody else in the room does too. So it's an opportunity to grow, make new friends, and have that commonality between other individuals.
11:44 left in the second half. It brings us to our under 12-minute media timeout, so we'll come back with Harper Baker at the Charity Stripe here on WMLU Farmville 91.3 FM.
Welcome back. Next, we're going to be focusing on how private media companies play a role in censorship. Does cancel culture silence creators who want to put their work out there for the public to enjoy? Let's take a look at how censorship can be seen on modern entertainment.
Over the last 2 years, cancel culture has become as important to conservatives as gun control, racism, and Fleabag are to liberals.
I mean, they're demanding that you disavow your own ancestors, that you hate your own country.
And it's not just conservatives. Prominent Democrats have also started publicly worrying about a spirit of censoriousness taking over the left.
There is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people.
I think that captured some really good points. Do you think that the general public's opinion on certain artists create conflict between the platform and the content creator? Caleb, what are your thoughts?
I think the general public has a big influence on what content creators post. From the outside looking in, I feel like big creators may feel pressured to kind of stick to what they've been doing and not speak their mind or expand on new ideas due to the fear of being a victim of cancel culture or even being censored by the platform they are using. And I feel like that can really create conflict or tension between the creator and the platform.
What are your thoughts, Leigh?
I think that the general public has a huge say-so in like what the content creator is posting on the platform, because if you think about it, we are the content creator behind that platform, so whatever we post, we're engaging with that audience. So if you're putting out content that isn't necessarily right to the public, or they don't really consume it and like get information from it, then you don't really necessarily have a platform because your public isn't engaging with that information.
Right, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we live in an imperfect world, so it's like we do need to be aware of the things going on, and even of the misinformation that is spread. What do you guys think about the pros and cons of cancel culture? Do you think one outweighs another, or?
I feel like the cons may outweigh the pros a little bit. I mean, it is needed in some ways to like keep people from just doing whatever they want online. But I feel like it almost opens up a new form of censorship and kind of gives the public like a feel that they can judge what other people are posting and kind of regulate or at least have an influence on what others are posting online, especially big influencers.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the content that we're posting, I feel like it definitely can be a pro because you're able to speak out your voice of opinion. So I think the cons only come into handy where you're not really incorporating that information that can be beneficial to the public. Like if the information that you're posting is going to be like hated towards or just inaccurate, misleading information, like that's going to be a con. So it's like just knowing like the correct information to post would be more so of a pro.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I know for me personally, it's like having my own like podcast and like the things that I say. I mean, and I don't even have like a huge audience or anything, but like I do really like take time to like pick apart what I'm saying to the point where like it is like, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I can't say anything, especially like explicitly. But no, I understand the reason for censorship. I do think it's necessary, but it sometimes gets to a point where, again, like we don't want to pretend like, you know, stereotypes aren't real or these issues are not real.
I agree. I feel like if censorship wasn't there, then it would just create a negative society in a whole. There would be a lot of negative stuff online, negative stuff in the news. I feel like censorship is definitely needed.
I think people just should just know more about like what censorship is, rather just coming up with their own opinion and then saying that certain content is hate speech. I think that they shouldn't necessarily say that unless they really know the full knowledge behind censorship, because it can be harmful, but it can also be helpful as well.
Right. Do you guys think that private companies should have like a really big say in censorship or even government for that matter?
I think we're going to touch on this later, but I think that private companies definitely should have a say in what they censor on there. But that kind of brings the responsibility of maybe some backlash that they get for what is posted on their platform.
I definitely have to say I don't really think the government should have a say-so since they're already like controlling a lot of stuff that we do today. But I do think that the private companies should have a limit to having a say-so in what we should post on platforms.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you all. I think we can all agree there's a lot to consider here. Don't tune out just yet. We'll be right back to discuss the effects of censorship on social media here on Tomorrow's Talk Today.
The Communication Studies Department has always prided itself on having our students do original research. And in the fall of 2018, when I was teaching that class, I wanted to look for a way to have our students present that research in a different manner. And I did a little research and I could not find anyone else who had live streamed original undergraduate research. So I kind of came up with the idea to have the students present it, and Dr. Paul was very agreeable here. And so rather than doing a traditional poster session or something like that, we came up with the idea to have our students present their research in front of the camera. And the cool thing about that is the distribution is much wider than it would be typically. Parents, alumni, friends of the department all got to watch that research, and the students also had something that was more lasting that they could look at later in life than a traditional poster format.
So one of the ultimate aims of doing research is that you get to share it with somebody and that it's just not for yourselves or just to have some sort of document. It's to be able to disseminate that research, whether you have significant findings or not. And so being able to have an audience for your research project is paramount. And having an opportunity to live stream it gives students an awesome opportunity to be able to share it with a large audience.
So being in the studio, there's just nothing like that. It's the whole overall experience. You got the cameras, the lights, everything in front of you, being on the stage, and all the information's there, and you'll have one take to get that information out as efficiently as you can, compared to having a poster session where people come and go as they please, and you're just set at one spot for X amount of time. So being in the studio, it's just a great experience, nothing like it.
Thanks for sticking with us. To end our discussion today, let's take a look at how censorship is found on social media.
There's been much
Debate this past year about freedom of speech and social media.
We should err on the side of greater expression.
They are literally spreading lies, misinformation, propaganda.
Companies that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield.
The dilemma: should social media companies censor speech that they deem to be hateful or violent or false? Or should they keep it up in the spirit of freedom of speech? And what happens when the speaker is an elected official?
I believe that we have two responsibilities: to remove content when it can cause real danger as effectively as we can, and to fight to uphold as wide of a definition of freedom of expression as possible.
Of course, the First Amendment doesn't legally apply to Facebook or to Twitter or to Instagram or YouTube. It was written solely to stop the government, not private companies, from censoring speech.
We can see a lot happening here, but how do you feel about the potential consequences that come from unregulated social media? Should private companies be left to regulate their platforms on their own, or do you think that the government should have some say? What are your thoughts, Caleb?
I feel like unregulated social media would eventually lead to just a lot of negative effects on society, and it would expose society to a lot of morally corrupting information. And I feel like the media platforms themselves are able to regulate what is on their platforms, but I feel like with that independence in regulating it, they should also be held accountable for any like negative information that they may not take down right away, and at least have some negative consequence for that.
That makes a lot of sense. What do you think?
I think that the government already has control of like what we want to speak out and say, just based on like the First Amendment. But I do think that private companies should definitely have some say in what we want to post, because we are the creator behind that private company. So if we're posting something that they feel like is harmful or is misleading, then they have some say to have us take it down.
Yeah, you actually kind of answered my next question. Do you think that big tech companies should have like a huge responsibility in what gets posted?
Yes, I feel like if they have the ability to regulate it and take it down if it is negative, they should definitely have responsibility if it doesn't.
What do you think that looks like?
Well, to go outside of the United States, for that accountability, in Germany, if any unlawful content goes online or anywhere, it has to be taken down within 24 hours, and if it doesn't, whoever was responsible to take that down deals with hefty fines and just consequences, which as it should be.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think that just being in the U.S., I think that private companies do have a say-so on what we should post, on what we can and cannot post, because as you can see in like North Korea, they have so much control on what we can and post, and just like China, they literally take down whatever they don't think is like what they want to hear, then they'll just take it down. So I feel like just being in the U.S., we do have the freedom of speech. We have the right to speak our opinions. We have the voice for that. But if we are posting that content on a private company, then they have the right to take it down if they don't think that is useful.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think that censorship should affect like the right to freedom of speech? Like, how do you think those go?
I feel like it shouldn't affect the freedom of speech, but like I said earlier, it doesn't protect what is considered as speech of violence. So I feel like the government can still regulate it if they think that that is violence. So it kind of like just creates a loophole, like I said before.
What are your thoughts?
I think when it comes to censorship, we have like I said, we have the right to speak our minds and voice our opinions. But if it comes down to it and the government thinks that we are saying harmful things to the public, then they have a right to say something about it and take it down. I mean, even though we have the right to voice our opinion, I mean, it's kind of like contradicting in a way.
It really is. I mean, and that's the problem with censorship, I feel like, is everyone has a different definition of what is offensive and what is not. And then to go even further with like globalization, that brings in like a plethora of different issues that like should be raised. I think that information, it's needed, but it does complicate a lot of things.
I agree. And to add on, like I was talking about the consequences that the platforms themselves should face if they are, if they do not censor the information that they should be. And to ask like one of you a question, not to turn it around or anything, but I feel like, do y'all think that the consequences that they may face may make them censor more information with the fear of being fined or suffering a consequence?
What's unfortunate, I think, is that like ethically, I feel like people should know better, just basic like ethics. There shouldn't be a need for people to like say hateful things in that sense. And so I don't know, for me it's like chicken and egg kind of combo, like,
Yeah.
I think that they should have like some type of consequences, because if you're gonna continue to post hatred stuff on social media, then I think if the consequences come in handy, then I think it will stop an audience from posting that sort of content.
Makes a lot of sense. I'd like to thank you all for joining me. This has been quite the discussion, but that's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank our panelists for their opinions and everyone behind the scenes for making this program possible. Be sure to subscribe to Longwood Column Studies on YouTube to get notifications when the next episode is streaming. I'm your host, Madison, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching Tomorrow's Talk Today.